some of our best modern children's movies are based on fairy tales. Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Rumpelstiltskin. Okay, well, maybe Shrek the Final Chapter wasn't a very great children's movie, but suffice it to say, these are movies based on stories that are very, very old. They've been passed down from generation to generation to generation through time and cultures and history. But, me being who I am, I wonder, where do these stories come from? And what does it say about the languages and cultures of the people who made these stories? It's no surprise that the first time that a story that kind of went like Snow White was told, it wasn't written down. These were stories that were just kind of being made up by people to entertain themselves and their family. And also, they were probably stories that every adult knew in the various cultures that they were being told in. So why would you write that down? Especially if you weren't even literate. When the Grimm brothers, who, remember, they were linguists. I made a whole video about Grimm's Law. I might link it in the description. I might as well. It was a good video. I like that video. When the Grimm brothers were rewriting these ancient stories for the modern German audience at the time, they believed that they were taking stories that were as old as Proto-Indo-European and making them German, which I think is interesting. There are arguments that these stories aren't as old as we think, that because the oldest written version is only so old, it must only be a little older than that. There's no reason to assume that they're that old. But the problem with that is that these stories are sometimes cross-cultural. And it's kind of like when we look at a word and it has a cognate in Hindi, right? It must mean that that word comes from a point when our culture and Hindi culture had the same root. You can do that with stories too, I think. So, I'm sure that some of you might be asking, what is the oldest fairy tale then? What is the best example of a Proto-Indo-European story? It'll lead us to a linking story time. This is the fable of the smith and the devil. So the smith was smithing, as smiths do, and the devil strolls up to him and says, "Hey, Smithy, I'll give you anything you want in exchange for your immortal soul." And of course, the smith is like, "Sure, sounds like a good deal. I'll do that." And so he asks the devil to be able to weld any two things together. And the devil gives it to him. And then he promptly takes the devil and welds the devil to a tree. Now, we've had this happen on the channel before. The devil hates being stuck in a tree. So the devil's like, "Whatever, I'll give you, just, what do you want? Get me out of this tree." And so the guy he says it just like that too. I'm not taking another take. And the guy says, "Just give me back my soul." And the devil's like, "Okay." And that's how the smith tricked the devil. Now that was a Ling King version of the story, but that essential plot exists, just like I said before, in India and all the way up to Scandinavia. So what does that say about it? It's most likely a Proto-Indo-European story. That's what it's proposed to be. Obviously, in some cultures, the story is a little different. It might not be a devil per se. It could be a genie or a demon or death itself. But what's important here is that it's a malevolent being tricking someone who's a smith, and then the smith tricks him back. So what does that say about Proto-Indo-European culture? It says a few things that are pretty obvious once you just consider it for a moment. One, there was a concept of malevolent spirits. 2, there was the concept of a smith. And 3, it was really cool to trick a malevolent spirit. Let's focus on that idea of a smith here for a second. So this is the beginning of the Bronze Age. It was when Proto-Indo-Europeans started coming around. A smith was a fairly new trade. And that type of person would have been pretty cool, right? What he was making was the cutting edge of technology for the time. What was pushing society forward, making better tools, better weapons, and making life easier was this guy making metal. So making a story about this guy duping the devil by pinning him to a tree with magic, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful story, and that it's a nice little window into Proto-Indo-European culture. Now, of course, there are naysayers to this concept of this being Proto-Indo-European. One argument is that the concept of a smith was too new to have a word for it. And I think that's horse hockey. We have words for people who make videos on the internet, and that's only a 10 to 15-year-old thing for people to do. Why wouldn't people make a word for this very specific task, this very specific job? It's not like a smith could be described any other way. Right? It's the guy who takes metal and makes things out of it. Like, who else is doing things like that? So I think that's kind of a weird thing to argue that there wouldn't be a word for it. There's also the argument that maybe someone made up that story way later and it just spread quickly because it's a dope story. But there's so many changes that have been made to the story, at least from what I've read. I don't know them for sure. But there have been changes made to the story as time went on. So it kind of shows that there's like an evolution, similar to the evolution of a word or even the evolution of something biological. That's what a lot of this is being thought about as. But we can see that this language has changed, and also there are lots of other stories that are following similar patterns. For example, Beauty and the Beast is proposed to be 4,000 years old. Same with Rumpelstiltskin. It's supposed to be 4,000 years old. It's spread about a bunch of cultures. As I kind of said before, these stories are really interesting because they kind of give you a little window into the past. And that's all I like. Thank you for watching Ling King. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and have a great day. Bye-bye.